All right, Sapora here, and this is species list number 8, our last one for marine biology. Yeah. Okay, so we've come full circle now with our species list. We are finally talking about vertebrates, and we're going to cover a few of the more common fish that we have right off our shore here. These are kind of near shore species, ones that we encounter on a regular basis. Of course, there's a lot out there. There's so much to cover that I can only touch on a few things in this class. Our last species list, all 7 of them up to now have been over everything but vertebrates because, if you remember, vertebrates only make up about 4% of all animals. So 96% of all animals on the planet are not things with backbones. So they're all the other phylums that we've covered so far. But we do have to spend a little bit of time here, of course, because you should know a few fish when you walk out of marine biology, on top of all the other things that you would find washed up on the beach or you'd pull up in a crab pot. So, vertebrata, we're going to focus on the fishes in this one. Okay, and the Pacific Northwest, we have about 500 species of marine fish right off our shore here on the continental shelf. And the number of different species that we have has remained pretty stable. So that number of 500, we haven't had many extinctions, or any, actually, if I can think of some. But what we have seen are huge and massive population declines. Many fisheries have seen declines of 50% or more since the 1970s. And one in particular, the Pacific sardine, has been close to collapse, complete collapse several times. And in 2015, most recently, it was shut down. So in blue here, I have a couple of different links. I have one from Scientific American about the ocean fisheries being cut in half since 1970. And this is a really good article. It goes through in a lot of detail, showing you some of the different fisheries that have been affected. And then this is one that there's a bunch of stuff on the Pacific sardine biomass, but you can see here that their numbers have just been in a steady free fall and have kind of plateaued here at the very bottom end of things. And that's because basically, we put a moratorium on fishing them. And sardines are incredibly important. They are food for everything out there. They're that link in the food chain between plankton and nekton. They're small, but they feed on plankton, and then they're fed on in turn by everything else. Okay, so let's get into the species list here this week. Shall we? Hit present. Let's go. Okay. So first off, we'll talk about the sardine, since we were already there. Pacific sardine, Sardinops sagax. Say that with me. Sardinops sagax. Kind of a cool name. So 16 inches, they can get a little over a foot, so they're not super tiny, but they're a pretty small fish. Of course, you've seen, sardines, you can get those in a can, and they're delicious, and they smell kind of like cat food. Let's be honest about that. So these form huge, massive schools, and they sort of rotate through the water when they're swimming, staying together, and they open up their mouths really large, and they suck in, and they catch, and they kind of filter out all the plankton of the water. Copepods and things like that would be their main food source. Their distinctive identification features would be that strong fork in the tail, right? This is how you would know it's not a salmon when looking at a photo. And salmon also have this adipose fin. You see this fin right up in here. Sardines do not have that. And then also the black spots running down their lateral line on the side are also distinctive with these. Okay, they can live up to 25 years, which is pretty long, you'd think, for a small fish. And these go all the way out, into the deeper ocean, right off the continental slope there, and also like on that whole continental shelf, the Neritic area as well. Okay, next up would be the Chinook salmon, one of our more common salmon species here. And salmon have a really interesting genus name. It is a mouthful. So get ready. It's Oncorhynchus or Oncorhynchus. Oncorhynchus. And the species name on this one is a really fun one to say. It's a Native American term. Get ready for this one. It is Chawicha. Chawicha. I like to say it with an upwards inflection. Chawicha. It's more exciting that way. So species name, genus and species together. Oncorhynchus chawicha, the Chinook salmon. These are also called king salmon because of their size. They get huge, 136 pounds and 63 inches long. That is as big as a person, okay? These are monsters, or they can be. The largest ones, they called June hogs, and they occurred in the Columbia River. I'm not sure of the exact size, like weight on that one, but probably over 136, maybe up to 150. I can't remember. But those are pretty much gone. The building of all the dams in the Columbia has sort of wiped out that specific population of Chinook salmon, or greatly reduced it. So they spawn in freshwater streams, and they also die there when they spawn, and then they're born there, and then they go out to the ocean, and then they come back. This being born in freshwater, going out to the ocean, and then coming back to freshwater to spawn is a term called anadromy, or they're called anadromous fish, and so you'll hear this term. Another species that is anadromous that is not on the list here is the Pacific lamprey, if you remember those that from the weekly questions, the agnathans, we talked about those. Of course, they're delicious to eat. This species in particular is one that is definitely favored. And the longest stream migration, wow, 2,000 miles on the Yukon River. And Yukon River is up, it comes out, empties in Alaska into the ocean there, but it flows all the way through Alaska and into Canada. It's a huge river system. Of course, these guys have black spots as well all over the upper back and body. They have black gums, which is another distinguishing characteristic as well on these. All right. Okay, now we're getting into some of our bigger ocean fish, and the Pacific cod is a really important one. It's an important one for eating in fisheries. A lot of fisheries rely on this. This is what you get when you get your fillet of fish, your fish sticks, and your general sort of all-purpose processed whitefish. Even like imitation crab is made out of this. So Pacific cod is heavily fished and overfished as well in many places. Okay, so before I get into all that, I guess we should talk about the name. Pacific cod. Okay, genus name, Gaddis. Gaddis. And see if you can say this next one on your own. Okay, that was pretty close. It is macrocephalus. Macrocephalus. Cephal means head. So octopuses are called cephalopods, meaning a head with feet, if you remember that. Pod meaning feet, head, feet. If you remember another cephal that we had, what was another cephal that we had in our species list? Echinoderm gorgonocephalus, grotesque head. Kind of a mean name. And these ones here, these are macrocephalus, means big head. So this is a big head. They got a wide head, and kind of their body just kind of gets skinnier from the head down in these things. They so Gaddis macrocephalus, Pacific cod. These are benthic bottom feeders. They cruise around on the bottom, and you see one of the distinctive features is this little whisker that hangs down. It's actually not hair, it's skin. It's called a barbel. They have a couple of these, and they can feel the bottom with those, so they kind of know where they are, basically, because it can be really dark. It can also be really cloudy down there. So not very good sight. So you got to use your other senses. So they would use their lateral line and their basic, ability to sense electric fields. They would use their barbel. They would use all kinds of other senses beyond just their eyes for food. And wow, females can hold over 6 million eggs. And these are bottom trawled. And so bottom trawling is a method of fishing that drops a big net, and on the bottom of it are kind of weights. They use tires quite often on these as well to kind of weight them down, and then they kind of drag it along the bottom of the ocean, and it picks up, this net just scoops up everything. And then they have floats on the top part of the net up in here to open it up. So it's just this big, mouth, basically, this big net mouth that drags along the bottom and picks everything up. Not only that, but it basically just acts like a giant rake across the bottom, and it destroys all of the benthic life that is down there. All of your sponges, all of your other like invertebrate colonies and things like that that are down, attached to the bottom, fixed to the bottom, just get wiped out in the process. And it's pretty gnarly practice, in my opinion, and there's been a lot of research on this as well. And the other thing is bycatch, so everything else gets caught in here. And if they're targeting cod, they may just throw out all the other stuff, throw it back in the water, and by that time it could very well be dead as well. So it is I would say a primitive way of fishing. And cod are targeted in that way, and they are fished all along the coast, all the way up Alaska and along the Aleutian Islands, and then out towards Japan as well. Boop, boop, boop. And we have videos here and stuff that I have linked as well. There's one right down here. You can click on that and go to it. Okay, pile perch is a tiny fish that you see around here in the bays and along jetties and things like that. In your kelp forest is where you would find them as well. But you'll see these off the Garibaldi Pier. If you've ever gone fishing off the Garibaldi Pier, you will pull up a lot of these little pile perch. And they have this little side stripe on them as well. They're not very edible. I mean, they're small. They can get up to, decent size. So you could eat them, but they're kind of a bony little fish. Yeah, and they're tasty. People do fish for them and eat them. I generally throw them back. Okay. And of course, if you catch a pregnant female that's kind of all fat, then throw that back in there, right? Okay. Feed on mollusks and crustaceans. Cool little fish. Let's say this one together. I like the genus name on this one. Damelichthys. Damelichthys vaca. Damelichthys vaca. The pile perch. Ooh, okay. Two of my favorites and two of arguably the most delicious coastal fish that you could catch. First one is the one that is caught the most often, eaten the most often. It is the black rockfish. Rockfish belong to the genus, in this case, well, there's other probably genuses of rockfish, but along the Oregon coast here, the genus Sebastes is a big group of fish. There are 38 species of rockfish along the Oregon coast, 38 different species. That's a lot of variety, and this is a great testament to the concept of divergent evolution. That a population will break off, and as they move into different environments and niches, right, the environment will shape them over time, and they will adapt to that. So here's a list of all the different rockfish that we have here in Oregon. Many of these are endangered as well, so you need to know your rockfish. But the black rockfish is not endangered. It's the one that's doing the best and is very common, and is caught and eaten quite often as well. So some really beautiful different types of rockfish in here. And you could take a look at the list that I have here. There's the China rockfish. This is one of my favorites, one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, of the rockfish. Okay, the black rockfish. So genus name is Sebastes, and species name is Melanops. Melanops. Right, so mela referring to darker pigment, Sebastes melanops. They can get up to 11 pounds, 27 inches long, so a couple feet long, and they generally hang out in schools and small groups and near rocks, and again, in kelp forests, they're in large numbers as well. They can live up to 50 years, which is pretty cool, right? And they occur all the way out to 366 meters, so the entire continental shelf is their habitat. Okay, the next one up is the most delicious of all the fishes that you can catch around here. It is the lingcod. Lingcod. This is different from Pacific cod, and there'll be a couple different ways to tell it apart from the Pacific cod. They're both big-headed fish, and they're both in a group of fish that cod kind of but belong to. But there are some differences to this, and mainly the main one that you would want to look at here would be the number of fins on the back. The lingcod looks almost a little more snake-like, more serpentine than the Pacific cod does. So the Pacific cod has 3 distinct dorsal fins. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 on the back. Versus the lingcod has 2 long ones, right? One really pronounced one, and then a smaller one that is also mirrored by a fin on the underside as well. And down here you see 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2 down here. That is really the best way to tell it apart, looking at those dorsal fins. There's other ways if you had them in hand. The lingcod don't have the pronounced barbels, and they the coloration is slightly different, and lingcod can get this bluish green as well. Okay, lingcod can get up to 100 pounds, and they can be 60 inches long. So you're talking a fish that, almost 6 feet long, and they're huge. They're really big. They live down in the bottom in the rocks, and they are an ambush predator. So they kind of blend in and hide, and then they swim out and strike. And this is kind of why they remind me of a snake almost. You know, snakes can curl up and kind of hide and then like to slither through. These guys move through the rocks and they wait for other fish to come by, and then they go out and strike them and they'll swallow them whole. I have caught lingcod that have like small rockfish. They've swallowed them whole inside their stomach, which is pretty cool. And, this says it feeds on GPO as well. So, giant Pacific octopus, they can feed on small octopus. They are a force to be reckoned with, and they have a really big mouth. Okay, scientific name for this one is Ophiodon elongatus. Ophiodon elongatus, because they're long. Okay, last fish for our species list. And then we're done. Starry flounder. Can't leave this guy out. Flounder are a type of flatfish. Flatfish are pretty cool. They didn't start out that way. They evolved that way. So flatfish, evolved from bony fish. When bony fish, if you notice, are kind of squished sideways and, long on the up and down, have a dorsal fin, have pectoral fins, right? Eyes on each side of the head. Okay. You just take that and you kind of smush it down, and then you get a flounder. A flounder is a fish that is swimming basically on its side. It is flipped over, kind of. And so here's what is happening. So here is the dorsal fin, here's the back, and then here is the pectoral fin on the bottom. And then here is the gill plate, and here's one eye, and then another eye has rolled over from the other side. So it is swimming on its side. It's flipped over. That's kind of cool. They can be pretty big, 36 inches and 20 pounds. And there's different types of flounder as well. And then further out, you get things like halibut, and these fish are all kind of related in a similar group. They cruise along the bottom, and they eat things like mollusks and worms and all kinds of small things. Take a closer look at the face of these. Let me bring this up real quick and see. So you can see the eyes are rolled over. One eye is rolled over. So it should just be, here's the back of the fish, the bottom of the fish, the stomach, the ventral area. Here's the side fins right here, and then the gill plate. But the fish's eyes have rolled over because it swims on its side the entire time. So one side is really camouflaged, and so you can see they really blend in well with the bottom. But the other side is really white. It's really pale. It doesn't need to be camouflaged. And there's the gill plate. Here's where their eye should be, but again, it's rolled over to the other side. Now, what's crazy is when they're born in the larval stage like a regular fish when they come out of the egg. They look normal. They look like any other fish. Eyes on each side of the head, right? They're elongated this way. And then as they mature, they develop, they roll over, and their eye, basically, as they grow, their eye just kind of rolls over to one side of their head. Yeah. I was trying to find one zoomed in. Oh, here you go. You can see the eyes there. On this eye here has rolled over from the side, and the mouth is kind of crooked. Cute fish. Okay, the scientific name on this one for the starry flounder is Platychthes stellatus. Platychthes stellatus. And the starry part just referring to probably the rays that come out from its fins and how it has that star-like appearance. Okay. That's it for the species list this week. Species 8 in the bag. So, study up on these. We'll have a review later in the week, and we can practice writing these and saying these out loud together. And that's it. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week.